Okay, so we're going to talk about converting from a regular setup with a tyre and a tube to a tubeless setup. The main advantages of tubeless is you take away any risk of puncturing by pinching the tube. That means you can start running lower tyre pressure, so you might find more grip. It's also going to be a little bit lighter, so you've got less rotating mass on there. It makes a really big difference to how your bike rides. It will make the bike feel more nimble. To convert a regular setup with a normal rim that isn't tubeless specific to tubeless, you're going to need a few little bits and pieces. We've got some universal valves. They're specially made for tubeless kits. Some tyre sealant and either a rim tape, or you can actually use this sort of gaffer tape or duct tape, which is really narrow, really strong. So there's two options really for rim tape. Step one is taking off your tyre and tube to get down to the rim, where we're going to need to put a tape on there to convert it to tubeless. Tyre and tube are off. You probably want to keep that tube as a spare anyway, because although you're taking away any risk of puncturing by pinching that tube, you might end up putting a little hole in that tyre, which means that tyre isn't going to seal once it's tubeless. So keep a spare tube anyway and take that on rise just in case. Make sure that the inside of the rim is nice and clean and dry, because this is where the tape needs to stick. You can get tubeless specific rims where you won't get these holes for the spokes. The spokes actually join the rim to the outside, so they're completely solid. So you're not going to need that tape like we're using today. This is a more standard rim, I'd say, where we're going to actually wrap the tape to cover these holes. So now let's look at getting this tape on there. There's different theories for where you should start. I always go to the opposite side of the wheel from the valve hole, where you'll find the weld of the rim. Start off there, wrap it around nice and tight, and then overlap it when I come back round here. That way I just have one nice layer of tape in that valve area, so that when I push the valve through, it should be nice and clean. Push your thumb in nice and firmly on that tape to get it in there. And this is where I like to put quite a lot of tension on that tape. So I'm really pulling it with my right hand to get that tape stretched out and get it right down the middle of that rim. Once you've gone right round the rim and overlapped it slightly, now use a sharp Stanley blade and just cut that tape nice and square. Now that that rim tape's on there, we need to get this valve into the rim. I've always used a Stanley blade to do this and just carefully put a nice little hole in that rim tape. Some people don't recommend that, because if you put too big a hole in, it might keep growing, which will cause you a bit of an air leak down there, but I've never had a problem with that. As long as you're really careful and put a nice small hole in that rim tape, you should be fine. So find your valve hole. Actually, with this rim tape, I can just about see through it. And there's my valve hole. Put a nice little hole in there. Don't have to go too big. So this valve is now just going to push through there and through the rim. Once that's through, you need to use that little lock nut to tighten that down. Tighten that up relatively firm so that you've got a nice seal between that and the tape. What I do now is get the tyre fully on there, dry, before I put any sealant in, just to check for fit. If that tyre is too baggy on the rim, meaning it goes on really easily, it probably isn't going to pump up very easily, because you need a good seal between the tyre and the rim surface. If it is baggy, I take the tyre off, take the valve back out and actually fit another layer of tape on there. That's going to increase the circumference of the inside rim, and it make it a tighter fit between the tyre and the rim. Obviously, if it's really hard getting that tyre on there, that's going to be a bit of a faff, but it should pump up a lot easier and seal a lot better. With a bit of experience of fitting tubeless tyres, you'll get a feel and you'll know if that tyre is tight enough to seal properly. If it's not sealing, it can be really frustrating. I've had that. It's especially hard sometimes when you've got a tyre that's been sat folded like this. The bead isn't going to sit very well to begin with on that rim. So a little trick is to take that tyre back off and actually just fit a tube. Pump that tyre up, get that bead to pop onto the rim so it's really nice and tight, then let that tube down and just sneak that tube out of one side of the tyre. So leave one side of the tyre popped into that bead, use the tyre lever to remove the other side of the tyre, pull that tube off and start again, so that actually this one side of your tyre is already sat in that bead and you've got a pretty decent seal there. That should help with you then trying to pop the tyre onto that tubeless system. There's two ways of getting this sealant in. The way I tend to use is get most of the tyre on, go right round, leave a little bit of your tyre open like that. On the back of the bottle there'll be a volume marker and it'll tell you how much of this to put in for your tyre size, and that's the way I put it in. Pour it straight into the tyre like that. The alternative method, maybe you'd use this if your tyre was really tight to get on. You just get that tyre onto that rim, and then you can use one of these to put the sealant actually through the valve and into the tyre, but for me that's a little bit more faff. Generally, just pouring it into tyres the way I do it. Give this a real good shake before you put it in. I've poured the sealant in. Now what I do is roll that tyre around so that sealant's going to sit in the bottom of that tyre. So hopefully I'm not going to get too messy when I now finish off getting that tyre on the rim. Now let's try pumping that tyre up. This is a moment of truth, the really frustrating part sometimes where it doesn't seal. There's another little trick to this. Try it first as it is. If you can't get it to seal, you take out the inside of this valve core. It's going to give you more airflow into there and you might get a better chance of popping that tyre and getting it to seal. Obviously your tyre isn't going to stay up because you haven't got the valve core in. Once you take the pump off, the air is going to come back out. But hopefully by that point you'll have that bead sat on the rim nicely, so when you put the valve core back in, it should work. I'm using a trap pump. I'm in a really nice workshop here at Badass Bikes. They've got a really fancy snap-on compressor there. I would be using that normally, but to help you guys out, I'm doing it the hard way to show you it is possible with just a trap pump. Hopefully. Oh, that's what you want. You start hearing the tyre pop onto the rim, and I keep going up to about 50 psi to get that tyre sat on the bead. Now it's a good idea to wipe any of that excess sealant off and give that tyre a nice roll around or a good spin just to get that sealant working around the tyre and fill in any little gaps there might be. I'll leave that tyre nice and firm until I want to ride it. So if I'm leaving the bike overnight, I'll leave it at 50 psi. You might find that it does go down overnight, but on that first ride you'll spin that sealant around and it should be fine after that. So if you are struggling to get that tyre to seat properly on that rim, there's 4 tricks. First is that inner tube trick of pumping that tyre up first to get that one side of the tyre sat on there nicely. The next one is to make that tyre tighter by putting more rim tape around. Another one is to take that valve core out so you get a better flow of air in there. Or lastly, you can use a compressor to get a big blast of air in there. Also a CO2 cartridge to pump your tyre up quick. Or there's these things on the market now called air shots, little cylinder that will give you a big blast of air to get that tyre seated. There you are, ready to roll. If you like the video and you found it useful, click like on the video. Also, for more videos from GMBN, you can click up here for our top 10 maintenance tips, or for our maintenance how-to playlist, click down here. Or if you don't want to miss any videos, just click on me and you can subscribe to GMBN.